Hey everybody, welcome to the video. Last time out riding my Boost, the throttle cable was sticking it wide open, which was obviously super scary, so had to change that thing out. Figure while I did it, may as well make a video for y'all. Quick disclaimer here, I'm no professional mechanic. Some might even say I'm not a very good mechanic. This is not really meant to be a how-to as much as it is to be a here's how I did mine. Take from it what you will, and hopefully it makes your job easier when you go to change your throttle cable. So with that, enjoy. To start, obviously you're going to take off your left and right panel. That's straightforward enough. I'm not going to show you how. Remove your hood, unplug all the electrical. Next, I remove these plastic rivets on the left and right part of the main plastic cover here. Popping those off. I just ended up using my torque wrench from the kit on my belt to take the right and left torque screw out of that main plastic cover. Pop the clutch tool out here to free up that plastic. Then we're going to pop another rivet over on the right side to free that plastic up. Set them aside. Pull these torque screws on the top of the sled, left and right. Pull those out and then set them with everything else, nice and organized. We're going to pop this middle plastic piece off. Pull it loose, set it aside. Next, I just decided to take the seat off. Figured that'd be a good one to get out of the way. Put that screw there. Yes, that's right. Everything nice and organized. Remove the seat. Oh, I know a lot of you are going to cringe at this, but I just used my Torx tool and a hammer here to get this really stupidly large plastic nut loose to then be able to access the control plastic here that has the key, the tether, headlights, and grip warmers. You're going to unplug all those, so you've got 1, 2, 3, tether there makes 4. That gets that thing out of the way. Now you can work that main plastic out and over to the side, pull some slack with your starter rope, and it'll tuck right under your sled, nice and out of the way. I like to put the cap back on at this point, just to make sure you don't get any debris in the tank. Next, I pulled these 10mm nuts and washers.
God, it's actually worse than I thought. You got the Ryobi.
The left and right side of the back of the tank. Set them there, nice and easy. There we go, everything organized. Last is this 10mm bolt. Up in the front here, I use an extension, and then I use my magnetic kind of nut grabber to pull it out so that I wouldn't drop it down under the engine. We all know how fun that can be. There it goes with everything else. Next is the fuel lines. They have these nifty plastic clips. You can just use your fingers to pull it back and wiggle them off. I'd recommend having some rags ready to catch that fuel that's dripping everywhere on me.
Trying to be a drift car? You're not a drift car, you're a dog. We've talked about this.
Now, last thing before we remove the tank is this plastic connector. Gonna pull that electrical connector apart, and now you can take your tank and set it off to the side. Next, I remove the left and right plastic rivets here, releasing the intake tube from the intake box. Then we're going, oh yes, there they go, nice and organized. Now we're pulling these 10mm nuts to take the, I believe that's the ECU, off of the intake box. Then you can just set that aside and out of the way. Next is this little toothed clip. Use a flathead, pop it off, and you can release your intake box there. Next, I loosen the bands on the charge tube here, prepping to remove that box. Then I remove the secondary by pulling the belt there, using the tool, these two 10mm nuts to move the oil tank out of the way, and it kind of hangs out of the way nice there. Move this lower Torx nut here so that plastic can flex enough that you can easily pull that secondary out and out of the way, set it aside. Next was unplugging all the electrical. It can be a little overwhelming, but know that there's 7 of them in total, and they all either correspond via color or by shape. So it's actually really easy. I wouldn't worry about it. Just unplug all 7, and now you're onto the aluminum clamps that hold that intake box onto the throttle bodies. It's a 4mm Allen, and the hardest one that's coming into view here is in the far end there. Got to get a long extension like I did, use a flashlight, and work on loosening that thing in order to get that clamp off that far boot. And you're able to squeeze your hand on the right side there to kind of stabilize the clamp as you loosen it up to free that boot. And now you can move this intake box up and finally out of the way. Now walking around, you can finally see your throttle cable and where you're going to have to pull it out from. First, you want to snap these zip ties that are holding that throttle cable in place. There's one here, and then one more here on this piece of rubber designed to hold the throttle cable that's also mounted to a coolant line there. Get it snipped and out of the way. Next, I remove these 8mm bolts that hold the fuel rail on, and a lot more fuel came out than I was expecting. So I'd recommend having a rag ready to catch that. But once that was out of the way, you can fit both your 10mm wrenches in there to loosen the old throttle cable up. Take the stud out of the rotator. I don't know if any of these words are correct, but you know what I mean. Loosen it up there, so now you can pull the old cable out. And man, have a look at this thing. Look at how torqued and twisted that is. No wonder it was sticking. Harold is not impressed, as you can tell. Now this is where my night starts to take a turn. We get the new cable routed down through in. Now I'm using the 10mm wrenches to tighten this nylon nut up against the stud there. And you know, I'm thinking this is a high performance machine. I want it at least snug, not over tightened, and I really didn't feel like I tightened it that much at all, and it just snapped loose. And you can see here in this photo, the upper one is the old style cable, the lower one is the new one, and you can see that the wall thickness on that is half. And, I mean, I'm assuming, I guess that's because they bored it out bigger to have that coating over the cable, but it makes it way weaker. And so with the resistance of that nylon on that nut and tighten it onto that stud, be very, very careful. I'd choke up on your wrenches and just barely get it tight and call it good. I got super lucky, and one of my buddies coming back from riding was able to stop by the dealership, which is an hour away from me, and grab another cable. I met him at a gas station and picked it up, got back home and started putting it back together again. Now this time around, as soon as it's starting to get even slightly snug, I choke way up on those wrenches and just get it sort of snug and then back away, back away. Now with the new cable ran through, I zip tied it to its rubber mount there, started to bolt the fuel rail back up. For these aluminum clamps, see how they're kind of bendy here and they don't actually have a pivot on them? I'd recommend pulling those apart, widening them up a little bit. It's going to make it a lot easier here, as you can see, to snap them onto the intake box boot and then work it onto that aluminum ridge. And then, like I said, here's an angle of me trying to get that far one. You can use your right hand and work it down in there to kind of maneuver that far aluminum clamp where you need it to tighten it down. Next, I started to put all the electrical plugs back together. Like I said, there's 7 of them in total. You can't do it wrong. I think here I got the yellow, you got the blue, you got a white one, upper triangle, square middle, lower triangle, and then kind of one hiding back right there, square one to put back in, and you're good to go. Started to put the oil tank back in, tighten down those 10mm nuts. Next, put the secondary clutch back on with the belt, get the clutch tool out of there, tighten this 15mm bolt back in. And I had installed that intake box without the boot on. I would have, if I could do it again, I would have kept that intake tube on the intake box and then pressed it onto the turbo. Would have made life a lot easier, but live and learn. Next, I installed the upper intake box onto the intake tube there, along with the 2 plastic rivets on the right and the left. Then I screwed the ECU back to the air box, put that tooth clamp back on. Now it was time to put the tank back on. You just slide that forward to where that hole lines up so you can drop that 10 in. And again, I use this magnetic, whatever that is, bolt grabber to drop it down in there so that I wouldn't lose it and drop it under the engine. Then I put the washer and 10mm nuts back on the left and right of the rear of the tank, clip the one connector in. Next was the fuel lines, blue one on top, just push it down in and then push it with your finger to tighten it down. White one was next, snaps right in. Nice and easy. I removed the cap so I could put this main plastic cover back on the sled, plugged in my lights, hand warmers, tether, and key. Push this plastic piece back into place. Now you're ready for your plastic nut. Yes, that's me again with the hammer chiseling away to get it nice and tight, but you'll see here, go to wiggle it around, doesn't move, good and snug. Put the lid to the tank back on. Now it's time for the seat. Tighten that torque wrench down. We're moving fast. Going for this center plastic piece, the 2 plastic rivets, snap them in place. Now you got your 2 Torx bolts on the left and the right on the top. Tighten them down, you're good. Plastic rivet there. Torx nut on the right side. And as we know, the left side's a little different. That right bolt is for the one closest to the tank. The middle bolt there goes on the lower fairing to secure that plastic by the secondary, and then you use your clutch tool to lock that plastic in place. Next, you put these two plastic rivets on the main plastic there that go into your upper air box. Put on the hood and connect your wires. You put on your left panel, put on the right panel, pull her outside and start her up to make sure it's all back together correctly. RPMs were initially high because I had the throttle cable just a smidge too tight, so you get under there with an 8 and a 10, and you use the cable expander to get the cable just right so the idle's where you want it, and then you are good to go. Picked it up with no stand because I'm a man, tested it out, and she's ready to ride. But if this is somebody with a 2024 or older Boost, that new cable unfortunately does not just fit easily. As you can see here, the cable with that coating on it is just a little bit too thick to fit through my existing Munster finger throttle. So I use my angle grinder to just do a disc width cut. And that at least got it to where I could put the cable in, but you'll see that the nose there falls short of sticking out for the clip. There's the stock one. And here's the new one. As you can see, the nose doesn't quite stick out enough to get a C-clip on there. I'm sure a lot of you guys are going to hate this, but this is what I had to do in order to get the new one to fit. So if you've got an older style thumb throttle or an older style finger throttle like me, that's just what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to cut away some plastic and drill the diameter a little larger in order to get this new cable to fit. It is what it is. There's still quite a bit of aluminum there, and that's a very easy pull, so I'm really not worried about it. And if it does break from running into something, then I'll just buy an updated one then. That's all I got. I hope this was helpful. We'll see you guys out on the hill.
Can't change up, my team too real, so we stay up.